If you would, take your Bibles, go with me to Philemon, and we're going to pick up where we left off. We left off in verse number 11, and I'm going to go probably going to try to get down to 17, verse number 17. It's a good transition of what's about to happen after verse 17. 17. We really going southern now, but I'm fighting allergies. All right, I cut grass. Whew! I thought I was dealing with it bad until I cut grass, and then I went over the Bethel Haven property, and that stuff was like up to your waist almost. It had gotten so tall. I don't know what I ran over while I was cutting grass, but I'm sure there was something in there that probably wasn't supposed to be. But I cut it in the dark. I couldn't see, but there's grass flying everywhere, and I've been fighting it this morning, all right? So you just bear with me tonight as I fight through it all, okay? So, but verse number 17 kind of ends a thought of what he's focused on, and verse 18 switches over to something else that Paul does, so we don't want to pass beyond at this time for tonight without being able to focus more specific on verse 18 and forward. But verse number 11 is where we saw that Paul was introducing to Philemon, Onesimus being the individual of the purpose of this letter. And he has, in verse number 10, openly said after giving the initial greeting and then reminding or at least acknowledging the good report and the good name that Philemon had, and reminding Philemon that he has a reputation for love, especially the love of the brethren. Very important to love the brethren. Don't forget that, Philemon. You love the brethren, the people that are saved, and just really focusing in on what he's known for doing consistently. And then he goes into verse number 10, where he very clearly presents the bush he's been beating around. He just goes right on into the meat of this sandwich theory of presentation of uncomfortable talks, okay? And so the meat of it all is, he says, I beseech thee for my son, which is son in the faith, Onesimus, whom I have begotten in my bonds. In other words, Onesimus has become a child of God. He has been birthed in the family of God through salvation by the ministry of Paul, or by the specific witness of Paul while Paul was in prison. Again, we've said before, we don't know exactly how it came around that Onesimus ended up meeting Paul. Was it on purpose? Did he know where he was? Did he go to see him? Or did it by chance happen to be a thing where they crossed paths at some point in some aspect of him being in the bondage in Rome, and through that made connection, and Paul had a chance to witness to him? We don't have the details of that. We don't know. What we do know is Paul openly proclaims that Onesimus is a different person right now. He is a son in the faith. He is one of the converts of Paul's specific personal witness of the gospel. And in verse 11, he acknowledges the fact that he understands, he knows where the issues are. He knows that Onesimus has been a problem for Philemon. And Paul doesn't try to whitewash or sweep under the rug any of the former issues. He acknowledges them, but then he combats the knowledge of the past with the newfound knowledge of the present. And so he tells Philemon, he says, which in time past was to thee unprofitable, but now profitable to thee and to me. So again, let's one thing I didn't put out in focus last time that I do want to acknowledge in this moment is when Paul says, but now is profitable, Paul still does not make himself the focus. Paul could easily have said, and this might seem small, but it all comes down to seeing the heart and mentality that Paul has. Paul is not trying to instruct or attack Philemon and tell him what he must do. Paul is beseeching, he's begging, he's pleading, and he's doing it as much for Onesimus' sake as he is for Philemon's sake. He knows what can be from a reuniting, now not of just two individuals, but of brethren, and removing whatever could be a wall between them. He understands and knows what the potential is and what he's seen in Onesimus and what he knows of Philemon. And you put those two people together, who knows what they could accomplish. But they've got to get rid of what could divide them. And so Paul points out, and when he says that he is now profitable, he does not say he's profitable to me, which is what Paul knows, and also to thee. No, he reverses it. And he still makes it more about Philemon's benefit than Paul's benefit. And he says, but now profitable to thee and to me. And then after he says to me, he qualifies why it is that he says that Onesimus has been beneficial and profitable to him, Paul, the apostle, in his bonds. He wants Philemon to know, by the way, don't take my word for it. Let me give you the evidence. Let me tell you just how impactful the change in his life has been. And so in verse number 12, he goes on and he says, whom I have sent again. So he's letting them know, yes, Onesimus is coming to you. Yes, he's coming back. This is not necessarily his idea. This is a very uncomfortable thing to do. But he's coming back because I have sent him. This is something that needs to be done. This is something that must be taken care of. He cannot continue and grow and mature with Christ with this cloud of past unresolved issue with someone who is a child of God. He might have been lost when it happened, but now that he's saved, there's no way he's going to be able to move past what has got him bound if he doesn't get it right. So I've sent him unto you. I want to remove every barrier, every issue. But by the way, Paul is also in knowledge of fighting and dealing with the adversary. Paul knows all too well how easily Satan can use something like this issue to stop Onesimus at any given moment, to stop him cold in his tracks from serving the Lord. The discouragement that he could bring one time ended up coming around, and one time someone who knew him before, someone who knows what has happened and never been resolved, one time that person being in the right place at the wrong time, and all of a sudden blocking anything and everything that Onesimus is doing, and then it becoming kind of a scourge to his potential ministry. So Paul has sent him. He said, I sent him again. Thou therefore receive him. Now this is more of a command. He's saying, listen, I did this because I expect you to receive him. Don't jump him. Receive him. And so, thou therefore receive him, but then he gives him a way in which he beseeches the receiving. Receive him, that is mine own bowels. What he's saying is, understand how important this young man has become to me. I sent him, but he's like a son to me. I'm as close with Onesimus as I've been with any individual that I have helped mentor and train to serve God. I'm as close to this young man as if anything happened to him, it would hurt me so bad as though someone in my family had died. It's as though you would have cut an arm or a limb off of my body itself. That's what he's saying, mine own bowels. In other words, anything happens to this young man after me sending him back, trusting that God's people will do what is right, namely, one of God's servants, Philemon, will do what is right. If anything goes wrong, you might as well just rip my guts out because it'll kill me. That's what he's saying. That's what he's laying out to him. He's letting him know This plea is from a very deep concern. And it kind of worries him, and the whole reason he didn't just send him and say, I trust it's going to happen. No, by the way, I like Paul in this aspect. Very rarely do you see Paul leave anything up to chance. Very rarely do you see him leaving anything up to the possibility that it's going to go okay. In most cases like this, Paul could have sent him back and said, I'm just trusting they're going to do it. Paul said, I'm trusting, but I'm going to send a letter as well. And I'm going to send some instruction. I'm going to share my heart, and can I say it in a biblical way? Peradventure, it could have an effect in helping it go right. Okay? In hopes that it could possibly help lend this to being an easily resolved issue for the benefit of all. And going into verse number 13, Paul is honest with Philemon, and Paul tells Philemon what he would have rather do. Okay? He says, whom, dealing with Onesimus, this young man, I would have retained with me. Honestly, Philemon, I really didn't want to send him. I didn't want to let him go. I didn't want to send him off to possibly never come back and help me anymore, because whether it goes good or bad, if it goes good and then the Lord starts using him and he stays over there and he no longer comes back to serve with me, I would have been just happy to keep him with me. He is such a big help. I'm not looking to send him away. I did not find a reason for him to leave. By the way, that says a lot about the character and hard work ethic of Onesimus. There are some people that are a blessing when they come around to help, and there are some people that are a blessing when they go home. I hate to put it that way, but y'all know what I'm saying, okay? There are some that they're not really there to help. They just get in the way and they really just eat up your time. And there are some that try their best to help. But everything they touch, you have to go back and redo, so they just added to your list of things and eat up your time. All right? And then there are some who are fit for the job, have the character, have the mentality, and have the work ethic. And I mean, just everything, every time they're around, they're nothing but a blessing. That was Onesimus. Onesimus fit the need. Onesimus had the character. Onesimus had the personal drive. Onesimus had a heart and a servant spirit about him. He is everything that Paul needed. And he wanted to keep him. But Paul, in his own character, says, I would have retained him with me, that in thy stead he might have ministered unto me in the bonds of the gospel. What he's saying is, Philemon, I know, this is a little bit more sugarcoating, okay? He's saying, Philemon, I know if you could, and you could walk away from your responsibilities, you would be here. You'd be helping me. You would be the benefit to my ministry. You would be the one that I would love to have with me. But I know how busy you are. I know all that you're responsible for. I know the burdens that you're carrying. You can't drop everything and come. But he was as though he was one from your household who is able to be here helping me in your stead. By the way, does that give you a picture of anything? Philemon could not go, but Paul says, here's Onesimus out of your house. Though you are not able, he is able to be here, and I viewed it as him able to be here in your stead, where you would bear fruit unto your account from the work of someone that technically was one of your servants. It sounds like missions, okay? So Paul is tying this thing of that there is such a thing as receiving fruit that may abound from the work of one that is able to go on your behalf. And so he points out here that Onesimus was there, and Paul said, here's how I viewed it. I viewed it that I wanted to retain him and keep him with me, that in thy stead he might have ministered unto me in the bonds of the gospel. He'd be a benefit to me on your behalf. But then here's the character of Paul. But, verse number 14, without thy mind would I do nothing. He's saying, Philemon, but it would have been wrong of me to bypass the authority that you have over the life of Onesimus and to skirt around your authority as though your authority doesn't matter. By the way, there's a good rule of thumb to look at that as well. That's a good way for grandparents to view things when it comes to the children, their grandchildren of their own children. I would, but without thy mind, I would do nothing. Again, I hit this one often. I just do. Because I've had grandparents tell me, not necessarily from here, but I've had grandparents different times, oh, my job is to spoil them rotten and then send them back home. So in other words, your job as a grandparent is to do the very thing that was opposite of what your job as a parent was, but since you're not the parent, you're the grandparent, you can make the parent's life miserable. And teach the grandchildren that mom and dad are just bullies and meanies, and my grandparents love me and let me do whatever I want. Now, here's the thing. If the parents say no, the grandparents should say no. And if the grandparents want to do something special, all they got to do is make sure it's okay with the parents. But then what happens is, then the grandparents let the grandchildren know that we have cleared this with mom and dad and they are okay. Why are we doing that? Because they need to know that everybody in authority is on the same page and not usurping each other's authority and not going around. And they have to know they cannot play people against each other. So, that was free. But that is what Paul's doing. Listen, that's what he doesn't want Onesimus thinking that Paul's authority overrides Philemon's. So here it is. As long as I go to somebody with greater power, I can just ignore the person I was supposed to follow in the first place. I can disobey that one as long as I can get that one to side with me. That's what Paul is saying I'm not doing. I am not going to go around the authority of Philemon and call the shots concerning the life of Onesimus when Onesimus has disregarded and disobeyed the instructions of Philemon, and he must go back and get that right first. Then if Philemon says, go serve Paul, go work with Paul, then now I have full authority from his authority to now take and guide him in life. But Paul said, without thy mind, I would do nothing. That's called character. And it teaches Onesimus what respect for authority is. You never try to use one authority to usurp another authority. All that does is cause conflict and confusion. And in the end, all you do, if you give in to that as an authority, all you do is create a rebel. Be careful. There's good, very solid principles in all of this that we see from Paul. But he says, without thy mind I would do nothing, that thy benefit should not be as it were of necessity, but willingly. So what he's saying here is we need to do this to where it's done right, done properly in a way that you as an individual don't feel the pressure to have to just bow to the fact, well, Paul said it, so I'm just going to, I'm just going to step back and let him call the shot on this one, even though he shouldn't be doing that. Okay? That's what he's saying. It comes down to it that it doesn't need to be by necessity that you follow this, but willingly, because if y'all can resolve this, there's going to be so much better benefit and fruit from it. And he goes on in verse number 15, for perhaps, he therefore departed for a season, that thou shouldest receive him forever. Now Paul is giving a true spiritual connotation to the possibility of what it is. And I like the way it is that Paul puts it. He's not being dogmatic. He could have said, because he departed for the very reason to be brought back for greater benefit. He could have easily said it as though it was fact, but he didn't. He left it up to, have you considered that maybe if you've asked yourself the reason, why did God allow me to have a servant to do me so ugly and so wrong and possibly even steal from me and all this stuff, and it seemed like he just got away scot-free. We don't know where he is. We don't know what's going on, and it looks like I'm a weak leader because people are just up and leaving, taking everything. Who else is going to be encouraged to follow his lead? Okay? It could have been Philemon struggled with that. Why did God let this happen? What Paul presents here is, Philemon, have you thought that perhaps, I know he doesn't say the Lord aloud, but it's the connotation he gives, that perhaps the Lord therefore allowed him to depart. Have you thought about maybe the Lord allowed him to do what he did as a lost sinner and gave him the ability to do what he did without being stopped because God knew it was going to lead him directly to my doorstep? That at my doorstep where I was held in bondage and I could not go. God brought him to me and not me to him. Could it be perhaps that he left so that he could be reached with the gospel? And he didn't know what he was doing, but God did. And God orchestrated and God put together. And he saw a change of life, a change of eternity, that thou shouldest receive him forever. And not just received in one way. And he says that in verse number 16. Not now as a servant, receiving him forever. Not now as a servant, but above a servant, a brother beloved. And I love how he puts those extra descriptive things in there. Not just a brother, but a brother beloved. Someone you can grow close to. Someone who can be of such benefit you don't know how you did without him. A brother that doesn't just show up to church, but one that is there for every need, every opportunity, every ability. One who tried to get away from serving and now can't help himself. He just wants to serve all the time. A brother beloved. Especially, and he puts on here, especially to me. Once again, he's bringing that, how close of a tie there is. But how much more unto thee, both in the flesh and in the Lord. And there is where he presents that Onesimus now presents an opportunity of blessing as a child of God, yes, in the spiritual aspect of encouragement, yes, and that what the addition he could be to the church there in the house of Philemon, yes, but in the flesh as well. And he's just talking about sheer work ethic. He's just talking about he is a body, set aside all the spiritual stuff. He is a body with a mind and a heart to help. He has a servant spirit. He is such a help to me. I don't doubt that you're going to see something you're probably not even really recognize. You see the face and he looks familiar, but you don't recognize the attitude. You don't recognize the person, and it's because there's been a change. And Paul tells him to receive him, for perhaps he left for a season that he might be received forever, but not as a servant, above a servant, as a brother beloved, especially to me, but how much more unto thee, both in the flesh and in the Lord. And we'll stop right here. If thou count me therefore a partner, receive him as myself. Now he presents not just how much Philemon means to him and the work he's done, but now he presents and says, listen, if you consider me and you close, friends, partners, ministry cohorts, you want to put it that way. If you consider us soldiers together in the work of the Lord, partnered together in all that we do, then receive Onesimus as though I just walked through your door. Because to me, he's as though he's just an extension of who I am. That is how beneficial and how intertwined he has become in my life and ministry. If he is with you, it's as though I sent a part of me to be with you. Just like it's the same way that Paul felt when it came to Timothy, the same way that Paul felt when it came to Titus, same way that Paul felt when it came to many others that worked with, young men that worked with him, that he trained and prepared and sent off, Epaphras being one of them as well. All these young men, all these individuals, and they say young men, they might have been middle-aged young men in that sense, but every single one of them young in the ministry. And yet Paul said, these individuals, especially Onesimus, is as though they are merely an extension of me. It doesn't mean they're not their own individuals. It doesn't mean they're trying to copycat Paul. But they've become that much to him. And they've become that effectual in the ministry. And so Paul is trying to remind and urge Philemon that the man you see before you is not the man that forsook you. And there is great benefit if you'll do what a Christian, what a child of God would truly do. Well, how am I supposed to know what a child of God would do? What would Christ do? Now again, that statement can be used in so many ways to be wrong. What would Christ do? He would love, love, love. Yeah, he also overturned tables, okay? So, and beat them out with a whip, okay? So don't misuse the understanding, but in this moment, in this scenario where you have two saved individuals, one that's been saved for a while and one that's been recently saved but has been trained by Paul and now needs to go get right, what Paul's saying is, do what a child of God would do. Don't see a servant, see a brother in Christ. Don't look at the failure of the past. Consider the evidence of the change and the success of the work of God in his life. And see, what he's challenging, see if receiving him does not show you the same benefits that I have had the privilege of enjoying with Onesimus being right here with me. Because he's profitable now to you and to me. So we'll continue and see. It might be one more, it might be two more Wednesdays. We'll see. All depends on how far we get, all right? We'll see one more aspect next Wednesday, Lord willing, where Paul steps up a notch and tries to cover one more aspect of what Satan could use to cause division. Paul is willing to take the responsibility of covering the cost. By the way, sometimes if you're gonna invest in helping people, you can't invest at arm's reach. Sometimes you have to be able to invest a little closer in. And it might cost us a little bit to invest in a life. But we'll see that. That's next week. Can't go there right now, all right? So we'll look at that, Lord willing, next week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight.